murdering his mother-in-law with 37 stab wounds, even severing part of her hand. This is what the son-in-law Raymond Lam did. He hired a hitman and even injured himself to mislead the investigation. Although he thought everything was perfectly planned, a single bloodstain unintentionally exposed him. The body under the stove case in Ping Chau officially begins. This was the first case of a body being hidden under a stove in Hong Kong, a story that shook the entire city. The investigation was a tense battle of wits between detectives and the murderer. What was the relationship between the mother-in-law and the son-in-law? What was the root cause of everything? Follow the story to uncover the dark truth behind this crime. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to keep up with future cases. Crime scene setting: Ping Chau, a small island in Hong Kong, surrounded by the vast sea. On November 6, 1959, at 11 p.m., a piercing scream rang out from the fishball noodle shop Raymond's Noodles at number 14 on Wing On Street. Mr. Chau, an elderly security guard, was on his way home when he stopped in his tracks after hearing the scream for help. By instinct, he rushed towards the source of the scream. Inside the shop, Raymond Lam was kneeling on the floor, trembling, holding a cleaning rag. Cold sweat dripped from his forehead. "My mother-in-law, she attacked me. I'm injured. She ran away," Raymond Lam stammered, showing his injured foot to Mr. Chau. A few minutes later, curious neighbors started gathering and whispering about what had happened. Victoria Wong, Raymond Lam's mother-in-law, was infamous for being quarrelsome, so Mr. Chau and others advised Raymond to report to the police, but he seemed hesitant due to family ties. That night, the neighborhood gradually returned to its usual routine. Only one person remained restless, whispered Ping Chau. He felt that something was off. The scream from Raymond Lam's shop didn't sound like that of someone being attacked. He recalled the voice, high-pitched, shaky, like a woman's. At dawn on November 7, 1959, Mr. Chau coincidentally encountered Raymond Lam on the street. He looked pale and nervous. He said he was going out to buy bread. Since they were going in the same direction, Mr. Chau walked with him. But halfway, he changed his mind and returned to the shop to cook his own noodles. In truth, this was not a coincidence. After the previous night's events, Mr. Chau suspected that Raymond Lam was hiding something and deliberately observed him. Before leaving, he again advised Raymond to report to the police. That afternoon, Raymond approached Mr. Chau. He appeared deep in thought. After a long silence, he said he had thought carefully about Mr. Chau's advice and decided to report the incident to the police. Since Ping Chau had no police station, Raymond Lam had to travel a long distance to Ping Chau to file a report. The police listened to his statement. After receiving his statement, the police asked Raymond to return home so they could investigate. He left, returning to his fishball noodle shop and continuing business as usual. That afternoon, a group of police officers from Ping Chau arrived in Ping Chau to search for Victoria Wong. They scoured the neighborhood, asking around, but no one had seen her since the night of the incident. Finding no trace of Victoria Wong, the police returned to Raymond's shop. They needed a more thorough examination of the scene where the attack allegedly took place. Initially, they assumed this was just an assault case, but upon entering the shop, an eerie feeling took over. The air was damp, a fishy smell lingered, and small reddish stains remained on the floor despite being cleaned. Raymond calmly explained that it was his own blood from the attack. But upon comparing it to the wound on his leg, the police noticed something suspicious. A small cut, only about 5 centimeters long, which couldn't have bled enough to stain the floor. Moreover, the bloodstains didn't appear as if they had dripped from a wound. They resembled marks from a struggle or a much more severe attack than what was claimed. The police went upstairs to inspect the attic. There, they found a dish soaking a blood-stained cloth. They asked Raymond why the cloth was there. He casually responded that he had used it to bandage his wound, and then washed it to avoid waste. If his statement was true, why was the water in the dish still deep red? Blood clots quickly, but the stains on the cloth had not dried completely, as if it had been soaked not long ago. Continuing their search, they entered the bedroom. As soon as they stepped in, one officer immediately stopped. On the headboard, dried bloodstains had seeped into the bedding. When questioned, Raymond gave an unbelievable explanation. It was his wife's menstrual blood from before. The officers were momentarily stunned, but quickly realized this was just an excuse. A large, smeared dried bloodstain could not possibly be menstrual blood. There were too many inconsistencies in Raymond's story. They no longer considered this just an assault case. However, without concrete evidence, they could only summon Mary Lam, Raymond Lam's wife, for questioning. When she arrived at the police station, Mary Lam appeared tense and confused. She claimed she had been ill that day, went to bed early, and was unaware of what had happened. During the interrogation, Raymond Lam repeatedly appeared at the police station, urging his wife to return home. He tried to act calm, but his impatient gaze and pressured tone raised suspicions. His behavior only deepened the police's doubts. They started connecting the dots. The large amount of blood in the shop, Raymond's illogical minor injury, and now the suspicious actions of both husband and wife. The police suspected that Raymond had murdered his mother-in-law, Victoria Wong, and injured himself to fake being the victim. But suspicion alone wasn't enough. They had no solid evidence. Unable to detain Mary Lam for long, they had to let her go. The next day, November 8th, the police returned to Raymond's fishball noodle shop to continue their investigation. This time, they meticulously checked every corner of the shop. They searched all the wardrobes, checked under the beds, but found no clear evidence. There was no body, no murder weapon, only a large amount of blood scattered across the shop. As the officers were about to leave, a young policeman had an idea. Check the stove, the place where the shop's soup was cooked daily. Stepping into the kitchen, he noticed a large pot placed on the stove, divided into 2 layers, with steam billowing from it. When he lifted the lid, a strong, putrid stench filled the air, causing the officers to cover their noses. One of them frowned and moved closer. Peering inside, a horrifying sight unfolded. Amidst the murky water, a portion of a human body, pale and grayish, was visible. The entire police team was stunned. One officer reflexively stepped back, shouting in shock. There was a body inside. They immediately pulled the pot down and uncovered the stove. A large burlap sack was wedged between the stove's layers. The shape inside was unmistakable. Upon opening the sack, they found a woman's body tightly wrapped, bearing multiple wounds. There was no doubt. This was the corpse of Victoria Wong, the mother-in-law who had been missing for days. The police immediately sealed off the crime scene. One officer found Raymond Lam's fingerprints on a knife discarded near the stove, a large knife still covered in dried blood. Additionally, they found black ashes in the kitchen. When questioned, Raymond stammered that he had been burning old documents. But the police didn't believe him. After analyzing the ashes, they found traces of burned fabric, possibly blood-stained clothing he had tried to destroy. The police concluded that Raymond had deliberately burned the blood-stained clothes and evidence to cover his tracks. There was no doubt. Raymond Lam was the killer. He was immediately arrested on suspicion of murder. In the interrogation room, faced with undeniable evidence, Raymond initially stubbornly denied everything. But under pressure from investigators, he began to waver. After hours of psychological confrontation, he broke down. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his voice trembled, and he confessed everything. The motive was money. He and his mother-in-law, Victoria Wong, had a fierce argument. She demanded more money from him, but he refused. In a fit of rage, Victoria Wong insulted him, calling him a useless, impoverished man unworthy of being her daughter's husband. Her harsh words pushed Raymond over the edge, and he lost control, murdering his mother-in-law. The murder weapon was the knife the police had found. However, he didn't act alone. He had an accomplice. Initially, they considered dumping the body into the sea, but fearing discovery, they decided to hide it inside the shop. The large stove became the perfect hiding place. He stuffed the body into a sack, dragged it to the stove, placed it underneath, and carefully concealed it. To mask the stench, he added pepper, salt, and burned the blood-stained clothing. After cleaning up the bloodstains, he created a wound on his leg and fabricated the story of being attacked by his mother-in-law to mislead the investigation. But the inconsistencies in his statements were quickly noticed by the police. The truth had come to light. Raymond Lam had no choice but to confess his crime. However, to fully understand the cause of this tragedy, we must go back in time to examine the relationship between the victim and the killer. Victoria Wong, 45 years old, was born in Huilufeng, Guangdong Province, into a poor family. She was once the concubine of a man in mainland China. After giving birth to her first daughter, Mary Lam, her first husband passed away, leaving her a lonely widow. She later remarried another man and moved to Hong Kong, where she had another daughter. But her second marriage was also far from perfect. The second husband did not like life in Hong Kong, so he returned to the mainland, leaving Victoria Wong and her two daughters stranded in Ping Chau. Victoria took on the burden of the family, doing various manual labor jobs to support her two daughters. Life was full of hardship and scarcity. Her eldest daughter, Mary Lam, had to work as a factory worker at the Great China Match Factory when she became an adult. The younger daughter was still in school, adding to the financial burden on Victoria. Her biggest hope was that both daughters could marry wealthy men to change their fate. That's why she was actively seeking matchmaking opportunities for her eldest daughter. A few years before the murder, Mary Lam was introduced to Raymond Lam, who was in his early 30s at the time. Raymond came from a poor background. He had worked as a laborer in a fishball factory before saving enough money to open a fishball noodle shop in Ping Chau. At first, he ran the business with a colleague, Vincent, but later Vincent withdrew his investment, leaving Raymond to manage the shop alone. When he met Mary Lam, they dated for a few months, found they were compatible, and decided to get married. But this marriage wasn't just about love. Victoria Wong set clear conditions for her future son-in-law. She demanded that Raymond provide her with 30 Hong Kong dollars per month, ensuring that she would never lack spending money. Raymond reluctantly agreed, knowing that if he wanted a wife, he had to accept the terms. After the wedding, Victoria continued to make more demands, further interfering in her son-in-law's life. Raymond complied with all of Victoria's marriage conditions, including an extravagant wedding banquet, a bride price, and monthly financial support. She demanded 5 banquet tables, a gold necklace, an expensive watch, and several $100s as a wedding gift. After getting married, Mary Lam quit her job at the match factory and started helping her husband run the fishball noodle shop. Raymond kept his promise, sending $30 to his mother-in-law every month while also paying for the younger daughter's school fees. Although Victoria didn't live with her son-in-law, in reality, he was financially supporting all 3 women, putting immense economic pressure on him. At first, everything seemed to be going smoothly, but Victoria was not satisfied. She felt that Raymond was not as wealthy as she had hoped and began to show disdain toward him. She constantly made things difficult for him, treating him as a worthless, incompetent man. Victoria was addicted to gambling. She frequently played mahjong and bought lottery tickets, hoping to strike it rich. When she lost money, she had no hesitation in asking Raymond for more. If he refused, she would curse and create chaos. At first, Raymond endured it, but the conflicts escalated over time. The tension reached its peak when Mary Lam became pregnant. Instead of celebrating, Victoria wanted her daughter to have an abortion. She had heard that a wealthy man was willing to support Mary financially if she divorced, so she wanted her to get rid of the child and find a new husband. Mary refused, which enraged Victoria. She secretly bought Chinese herbs and prepared them as supplements, which were actually abortion-inducing medicine. When her daughter resisted, Victoria resorted to physical abuse, trying to harm the unborn baby. Despite the violence, Mary managed to carry the pregnancy to term and safely gave birth to twin babies. One might have expected Victoria to change after becoming a grandmother, but things only got worse. She continued gambling, and whenever she lost, she would go to her son-in-law and daughter to demand money. When refused, she would go straight to the fishball noodle shop, making threats and causing disturbances. Raymond Lam had to manage his shop, take care of his family, and deal with his mother-in-law, all while feeling increasingly overwhelmed. Pushed to the edge, he felt helpless and resentful. The dangerous thought began to form in his mind. Was there a way to get rid of her permanently? And so, the tragedy began. On the morning of November 6, 1959, the peaceful atmosphere at Raymond's fishball noodle shop was disrupted by the arrival of Victoria Wong. She demanded that Raymond give her $5, a significant amount at the time. When he refused, she blatantly admitted, "I need to pay off my gambling debt from last night." The argument escalated, and in the end, Raymond reluctantly took money from the cash register and handed it to her to avoid trouble. Just a few hours later, Victoria returned, this time asking for $1. Raymond firmly refused, but she went into a frenzy, smashing things inside the shop. Frightened customers fled without paying, and his business suffered a heavy blow. Not wanting to lose more customers, he clenched his teeth and handed over $1 to his mother-in-law, trying to remain calm. After cleaning up the shop, he left for the ferry to Hong Kong to buy supplies. On the way, he coincidentally ran into Ken Chan, 36 years old, and Leo Law, 39 years old, two drug addicts who made a living through shady dealings. Seeing the frustration on Raymond's face, they pressed him for details. After hearing about Victoria's constant harassment, Ken chuckled. "If that's the case, why not take care of her?" That casual remark planted a terrifying idea in Raymond's head. Leo added, "We can help, as long as the price is right." At first, Raymond hesitated, but years of accumulated anger and resentment made him seriously consider their offer. Ken and Leo initially asked for $100, but after some bargaining, they settled on $70. The silent deal was struck. Victoria Wong had unknowingly been sentenced to death. The plan was set. That evening, they would lure Victoria to the shop and swiftly take action. That afternoon, Leo approached Victoria, inviting her to the shop under the pretense that her son-in-law had something important to discuss. Without suspicion, she agreed immediately. As darkness fell, the fishball noodle shop flickered under dim lights, with two shadowy figures lurking in the background. At the scheduled time, Victoria had not yet arrived. Growing impatient, the two men left the shop to find her and spotted her chatting with a neighbor on the street. Leo approached with a fake smile and called her back to the shop. As soon as she stepped inside, she was murdered and hidden in the kitchen. What followed was exactly what Mr. Chau had heard at the beginning of the video. The question remains, was Mary Lam, Victoria's daughter, present at the scene at the time? According to Raymond's testimony, his wife had left the house that morning, taking their twin children to the Match Factory dormitory to avoid trouble with her mother. She was not present when the murder took place, or at least, that was what Raymond told the police. Early the next morning, Raymond left the shop to meet Ken and Leo to discuss how to dispose of the body. However, on the way, he accidentally ran into Mr. Chau, preventing him from acting immediately. It wasn't until late at night that the three met again to finalize their plan to get rid of the corpse. They decided to use dozens of pounds of pepper to mask the foul odor. Then they wrapped the body in another layer of burlap, carried it to the stove, and placed it underneath. Raymond's fishball noodle shop was no longer just an ordinary restaurant. It was now hiding a horrifying secret. But crimes cannot stay hidden forever. Just days later, the police got involved. All three men were arrested, but strangely, Ken Chan and Leo Law were not charged with murder. Instead, they became key witnesses in the case, helping the police convict Raymond Lam alone. Under the weight of evidence, Raymond confessed everything, from the financial disputes to his sinister plan. The court sentenced him to death, but the story did not end there. The people of Ping Chau sympathized with his plight and launched a petition for a reduced sentence. In the end, his sentence was commuted to 12 years in prison. The real masterminds, Ken Chan and Leo Law, remained free and unpunished. After the case, Mary Lam was unable to care for her twin children and had to send them to an orphanage. Victoria Wong's younger daughter was later taken in by relatives. Everything collapsed, a family torn apart by greed, gambling, and crime. The case may have faded into history, but its darkness haunted Ping Chau for many years. This concludes our video. If you enjoyed it, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more thrilling stories.